in that case, I'm going to start webinar, and hopefully we'll see people start to arrive. And we have 46 registered, so I'm guessing we'll get some dropouts, but hopefully we won't get many dropouts. Good evening, all. I think it automatically brings them in, not all in one go. I think that's how it works.
Okay.
That's how it seems to be working. Oh, hey, Josh. I don't think participants, I don't think the attendees can turn on the ability to talk. I think you're naturally on mute. So you can't answer me, but good evening, everyone. If and when we have questions, we'll turn on the audio function for you. But we'll give things a few minutes for people to be admitted. So Liz, have you travelled far to get here tonight? Is that?
Yeah, I've travelled all the way to the same chair I've been sitting in all day. It's terrible. It's terrible, but I'm here in Hanham in Bristol.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I know of it.
Yes, out on the outskirts, and it's, as I would imagine everywhere in Bristol, is pouring with rain right now. So
yeah, same here.
Yes, we do sometimes get a bit of difference between Bristol and Bath because of the hills, but yeah, I suspect it's like this everywhere today.
It was nice today. I went out for a run today. It was lovely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was glorious.
I nearly broke my ankle the other week, falling down a bus.
Oh dear.
Class, and you know, it was before the cricket started, so you know, you can't blame any of that. But yeah, so I've been a little bit immobile for the past couple of weeks. It's a shame.
Fingers crossed recovery. Cricket. I'm not sure how before the cricket, so you can't blame the cricket.
No, well, also there's the things that go along with the cricket, which is sitting down and drinking pints of Thatcher's.
I see.
I've done any of that yet, so
I'm not very familiar with cricket at all.
Oh right, okay. Like many sporting occasions, it's an opportunity for other side activities too. So
gotcha. Similar to Hanham, I know of cricket.
Yes, you could say the same for me in other sports, to be fair.
Do you mean sports rather than other sports? Cricket's not a sport.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that could be a whole other conversation, couldn't it? I'll let you fight that out with my cricket-loving family.
I'm not willing to get into that fight.
Nah, I wouldn't.
I have a one-liner. That's all I have.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah. So we're seeing people flow in now. I think it does bring them in deliberately slowly. Plus, we're still a little bit early, so
sure,
we'll let people roll in. But for those of you who are here now, thank you very much for coming. I'll do proper introductions in a couple of minutes when we have some more people in and when we're giving people a chance to get through the virtual gate. But as you know, or hopefully you know, we're going to talk about STEM learning, and there'll be a lot of general stuff on STEM learning and how this whole thing works. And then we'll, in the Q&A, certainly, I imagine we'll see if, and I'll do a few words at the end, we'll see a bit of a focus, at least, on digital STEM learning and how the digital stuff is going to be, ideally, the bit where we can add value, where we, the volunteers, or potential volunteers, I'm definitely lining you all up to be volunteers here, by the way, where we, the volunteers, get to add value to schools and similar organizations, and ultimately get to add value to learners in the domain in which we have expertise. So that's what we're going to talk about. So we are seeing people flow in now, so we'll give them a couple of minutes to actually get in and get virtually settled in. So I know that we've got, so I won't ask anyone to go off mute yet. I won't click the off mute button yet, but I see a couple of people that I work with really keen on getting some new STEM ambassadors in. Because, so I was at a talk yesterday for new BCS members, in fact. So I'm definitely pushing BCS membership for those of us who aren't already BCS members. And one of the things we chatted about, one of the things that came up was that this early engagement with other things can be really, really valuable. So getting involved with things outside your immediate workplace, even if those things are nominally providing value to others, they provide value to you as well. So I've learned that a little bit late. In fact, I wish I'd learned it 20 years ago, but I only in fact learned it about 5-6 years ago. Right, I've got a, Joe, are you still here, by the way?
Yeah, sorry, I was just on mute.
I've got a request from someone in my office saying, oh, I've not registered, can I still join in? So will it work if I send a link?
Yeah, so you
Direct?
should,
Oh, I can see that copy link, yeah. Oh, wow,
yeah.
that's remarkably easy. Okay, well, I did not think it was, well, I'm very impressed. I did not think it was going to be that easy. Right, so I think we've got enough to be going on with, but I'll let Alyssa join in because I've just sent her a link. So I'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll see people roll in after that as well. But I'll do some intros and stuff in a moment.
Well, I've just started the video for the last time, and that lasts a minute. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Is the video full of spoilers? Is that the whole material?
No, I think you might be full of spoilers. I don't know. Like, I have to say some of what you've just said in a different way, but that's okay because it reinforces the point.
No, it's fine. That's what I was saying. Nobody was listening, so it's all good.
Someone raised their hand, I think.
I thought I saw that. I think I did that. I thought I did that rather. No.
Oh, that might have been you. Okay.
No, I'm doing what I did before again, and no one's hand is going up. So.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Okay, right. Well, let's. Oh, 50. Oh, there's a timer on it. Okay.
Okay. There we go.
My time's all over the place. So, good evening, everybody. So, thank you very much for coming along. I'm Dave Donaghy. I'm the chair of BCS Bristol and Bath. That's a Bristol and Bath branch of BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. I'm very happy that we've recently rebranded. We've got all the stuff done for the rebranding. We are now formally the Bristol and Bath branch rather than just the Bristol branch. And I'm very much looking forward to getting a bit more engagement with Bath people, which includes me, obviously, to do more stuff. So I'm very, very happy this evening to have Liz Lister with us from STEM Learning. And she's going to talk to us about STEM learning in general. And I'm not going to say anything else just in case I accidentally give some spoilers. So we've got it'll be about 40 minutes or so with Liz, and then I'll do a few words at the end, and then we'll open up to Q&A. So you should see a Q&A box and a chat box. If you have questions for Liz or for me, but mainly for Liz, then please do put them in the Q&A box, because that gives a bit more functionality for us to answer the questions and record the questions rather than trawling through a chat. Please do feel free to use the chat for networking if you want to. We would normally be doing this face-to-face, so there'd be opportunity for networking, and we can make sure that we allow that in whichever way works online. But if you have questions, then use the Q&A box, and then we've got a little bit. There's a few more Zoom tricks that we can use to address the questions. So without further ado, welcome, Liz. Thank you again for coming along to talk to us. I'll go on mute in a moment, and I'll leave it to you. And if anyone's got any problems, then ping me a message. But over to Liz.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everybody. I don't know everyone, but hopefully at some point this evening, I might even hear some of your voices. But yes, it's what I'm going to present tonight is a bit of an overview of what's called the STEM Ambassador Programme, and what might be, I'm going to assume at the moment, I'm going to full disclosure that no one here is a STEM ambassador, and I'm going to go from scratch. However, if you are a STEM ambassador, feel free to sort of chip in, and I might be able to pop into the chat every now and then and have a look and say hello to you. But first of all, thank you very much for your time, both if you are a STEM ambassador as one, but also just to come along tonight to find out more about what this is all about. there will be chance for you to contribute. There will be chances for you to, ask questions and take part. And there'll be a chance for us towards the end to start really shaping what this looks like from the perspective of people like yourselves who work in the digital industries, as it were, in the broadest possible sense, what we can actually do with you to add the greatest value, as Dave uses that phrase really well, to other people. So I'm going to just give myself some legitimacy to begin with and talk about me. Like I said, as Liz Lister, I work for something called the STEM Ambassador Hub West England. And I've been doing this job now for nearly 10 years. I've been working for the STEM Ambassador Hub, and prior to that, I actually was a secondary school science teacher. So I come from an education background, certainly not from a technology background. And I am very much a user of IT and computing rather than a maker as such. But I've been involved in that and various other bits and pieces over the years. I did a master's in science communication at UE Bristol, which is what brought me to the west of England in 2008. And then I've been doing an awful lot of training and brokerage, I suppose, of STEM enrichment. So STEM, for the uninitiated, is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's the very broadest of terms, but it is just an acronym that refers to all those disciplines which, it's relatively easy to see are quite well associated with each other. And so I've been talking about this thing STEM for a long time now. And I've done various grant-funded projects, the STEM Ambassador Programme being a large grant-funded project that I'll talk a bit more about, but various other bits and pieces supported by people like the Institute for Engineering Technology and the Royal Academy of Engineers and all those sorts of things. I also, in my spare time, dabble in a bit of filmmaking and might occasionally call myself an artist, but that would be a bit cheeky. And the closest I've ever come in that regard to anything digital is my thing Knit Twitter, which I did last year, which was part of the I can't remember the name of it now, Control Alt Delete festival, which was in Bristol, based in Bristol, delivered online last spring. Last autumn, sorry. So you may have come across that and me through that. So I'm been around and about for quite a long time, and that is my sort of justification for feeling like I can talk to you today about this stuff. So my organisation that I work for is a little tiny consultancy. There's only 6 of us in the business at the moment, called Graphic Science, and we focus on engagement in science and engineering and STEM more broadly in all sorts of public domains, including education and schools. And we have this contract from the organisation STEM Learning to run the STEM Ambassador Hub for the west of England. And you can see on that map on the left-hand side, right-hand side, oh, got my left and my rights mixed up. We're the green blob down in the southwest of England. So we manage volunteers across that whole region, from Gloucestershire down to the far reaches of Dorset. We also work collaboratively with our neighbours in the southwest peninsula, and we do a lot of stuff with people like Tech Southwest and so on across the whole southwest of England. And we our most recent collaboration was called Southwest STEM Fest, which we ran completely as an online festival of STEM. And we've been nominated for a Tech Southwest Award for that. So if anyone is interested in the Tech Southwest Awards, you may well see us crop up there as well for our Southwest STEM Fest. But yes, one of the great things about the STEM Ambassador Programme is that it is funded by the UK government to cover the whole of the United Kingdom. So it isn't just England. And if you're talking about education, England is an area that is covered by the Department for Education, but not Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. They sit outside that. So the Ambassador Programme actually stretches across the whole devolved nations as well as all of England. And it has been funded for years. It's been around for ages, over 20 years now in some way, shape or form. There has been a volunteering program such as STEM ambassadors, although it's been called various things over the years, for an awfully long time. And as a company, we've been involved since I think it was 2008 we got our first contract. So we've also, you know, been around the block a bit, to put it bluntly. So so the STEM Ambassador Programme is government funded, like I said. It has survived many changes in government as well over the years. Currently, the funding comes through UKRI, UK Research Innovation, which is our arm's length body that funds UK research in universities mostly. But ultimately, the money comes from the UK government and is managed by STEM Learning, and we operate it locally on behalf of them. So I've said an awful lot about, I've used the phrase STEM ambassadors a lot, and it's probably time I explained a little bit what a STEM ambassador is. So there are a lot of them around. So there are 33,000 registered STEM ambassadors across the United Kingdom, making it one of the largest volunteering programs in the country. It's pretty huge. And over the course of the past year or so, more than 500,000 hours of volunteering have been clocked up. And I do mean the last year, so, you know, including the pandemic, and we've had to adapt, obviously, because of that. And over 7,000 employers engaged, and that's everyone from the very, very biggest engineering employers that you can name in the UK, people like Rolls-Royce, people like Airbus, people like the big civil engineering contractors and so on, have some engagement with the STEM Ambassador Programme, right down to individual freelancers who have an idea that they could make a difference. So individual STEM ambassadors come from a vast range of STEM related disciplines and careers, everything related to science, technology, engineering, mathematics, everything that supports that industry. Everyone who feels that it's important that they tell people about these industries are STEM ambassadors. So it's a really diverse bunch. We start at age 17 with volunteers. So people who are, for example, doing apprenticeships become STEM ambassadors, and we go all the way through, right through to our, you know, cohort of retired engineers, scientists, and so on, who obviously have a bit more time to be able to do some volunteering, but also a huge amount of experience and expertise that they can share. So a vast age range. They all have this idea that they can make a difference with what they know, and that a difference needs to be made. So it's not just I've got something to offer that people will benefit from. It's the idea that there is, in fact, something that needs to be addressed through people with experience and a passion for STEM, talking to young people about that. It's interesting to note that approximately 45% of all the STEM ambassador cohort across the UK is female. In most STEM industries, there is a disparity between males and females who are working in those industries. And actually looking at the number, it's probably slightly overrepresented, representative of females in the STEM Ambassador Programme. And that goes back to the last point I made. So it's not just people thinking, I've got something to offer. It's also people thinking there's something that needs to be addressed here. And for the women who are working in STEM, they have experienced this firsthand, and they want to, in some way, use that experience to help young women, girls still in school, to appreciate that there is a role for everybody in STEM. Not all STEM ambassadors are graduates. Not all STEM ambassadors have been to university. Not all STEM ambassadors are, professors of this, that, and the other. In fact, very few are professors of this, that, and the other, because they tend to be very busy, those people. And actually, not all STEM ambassadors are STEM professionals per se. They may not think of themselves as scientists or engineers, but they work in that sort of industry. So they work, for example, for a utilities company in business services, but they become a STEM ambassador because they see the need for people to talk about those things. So I'm hoping that the people who are listening this evening can see that they probably fit the mold of a STEM ambassador. And I think if you've come along tonight, you probably see that there is some reason for you to volunteer some time, either from a perspective of that people can learn something from you, or that there is something that you can offer that is filling a gap, or putting something back that you feel is lacking or missing, or that you didn't have when you were coming up through the ranks as a young person. So what it is that STEM ambassadors can do, there's some descriptions there. Obviously, this is a graphic that I've taken from my corporate comms, but the purpose of people like myself and all these hubs, STEM ambassador hubs across the country, is actually the STEM ambassador program is kind of like a bespoke program. So for all those 33,000 STEM ambassadors, quite a proportion of them are doing their own thing. They're doing something that they've developed themselves, or they're in a small group of other STEM ambassadors, they've developed something, or they've taken a resource, or they've taken an idea, an activity, and they're running with it. And as the STEM Ambassador Hub, we help them put that activity together, find an audience for it, find partners to work alongside them. That sort of flexibility means that it's really hard to pin down one activity, one thing that all STEM ambassadors do. They all communicate, but that's, a pretty broad church. So broadly speaking, a STEM ambassador will visit, either virtually or in person, an educational establishment like a primary school, a secondary school, a further education college, or go do the same with a youth organisation like the Guides or the Scouts, or maybe their local library or a museum or somewhere like that where young people are. So they will be physically or virtually present with those young people. And they will do something or talk about something related not just to STEM, but to the bit of STEM that matters to them. So they'll talk about their career, they'll talk about their interests, they'll talk about their qualifications, they talk about the projects they're involved in, they talk about anything that they know, and we help them through activities and so on, make that engaging. So that might be a practical workshop, hands-on physical activity. It could be a debate, a discussion, a panel event, those sorts of things. Huge variety of activities that STEM ambassadors get involved in. And it's actually quite a low ask in terms of volunteering program, which is probably why there's so many STEM ambassadors. The absolute bare minimum is one activity a year, and that could include things like training, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So key things are, STEM ambassadors do something to do with STEM, and in this setting with people like yourselves, we could probably say we focus more on the T, perhaps maybe the E, possibly a bit of the M, and maybe we'll be supporting some science along the way as well, or we'll be involved in computer science. So there could be any one of those things, but it has to sort of have that focus of STEM. Why STEM? Well, I've already touched on some of those reasons that that STEM isn't necessarily very representative, and so encouraging as broad a range of young people, a diverse range of young people into STEM is really, really key from 2 points of view. One is from STEM's point of view, right? We want STEM to be really good, vibrant. We want this to be a powerhouse, the country to be a powerhouse of research and development and so on. We need talent, we need people, we need enthusiasm, we need those people with the skills and the knowledge and the expertise to want to come and work in STEM and train and do all those things. It's good for STEM, it's good for science, it's good for technology and so on and so forth. It's good for the country, it's good for the economy. On the other hand, it's also arguably really good for young people. So historically, we have seen that the sorts of young people who tend to go into STEM careers tend to have STEM in their life somewhere as a child. So maybe a parent is a scientist or an engineer, or a grandparent or whoever's looking after them. Maybe they get to go to these, science festivals or go to a science centre. Maybe they have the opportunity to take part in clubs and those sorts of things. So the children who tend to do those sorts of things tend to be the ones who then go on into STEM. And that's can be a bit of a closed shop. And it's not always the case that children from families perhaps with less financial or economic resources, children from families who aren't the sort of white British family, those kinds of considerations can sometimes put young people off from considering a STEM career. And so for the sake of offering as many opportunities for a really great, interesting, rewarding career to as many young people as possible, that's why we focus on STEM as well, because it's good for young people. So it's good for STEM, but it's also good for young people. The STEM ambassador activities are voluntary, so you don't get paid by us to do them. So that's where working alongside employers is really important. So as some of you will know or be aware, that employers often have volunteering hours that they offer their employees to take part in whatever community-based activity or volunteering activity they can think of. STEM ambassador activity falls under that sort of category, and as an added bonus for the employer also means that they're getting their name out there as an employer, they're getting their industry out there, getting that known to people, and also they are potentially making young people at really crucial points in their life aware of opportunities like jobs that are coming up or projects that might be interesting, or apprenticeships, that sort of thing. So there is a bit of a I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of situation with the voluntary aspect of being a STEM ambassador. But for a lot of individuals, it is purely voluntary. They do it because they have a passion for it and they see the need for it. And what we try and make sure is that people aren't out of pocket. So the organisations that are benefiting from that volunteering support the volunteer to deliver an activity through, providing materials and so on. And the other thing about STEM ambassador activities is that they directly benefit young people. That tends to be the reason why people get into this. They want to be face-to-face, in person, talking to young people, feeding off that sort of enthusiasm, excitement, slight craziness that you get working with young people. The other way of having an impact, obviously, is to work with the influencers of young people, so primarily teachers, but also youth workers, other volunteers who are doing running youth programs, and so on. So you don't have to work directly with young people to have that kind of impact. You can be working with their teachers and so on. And so the range, like I say, is pretty huge. A quick word about COVID. Obviously in March 2020, schools shut down. And what actually happened after that is still a matter of some debate, and it's certainly variety across the country from school to school, actually the extent to which young people were still being taught whilst they weren't at school. And that obviously had a huge impact that was different depending on what sort of resources a young person had when they went home. And the digital divide is a massive issue. And if you didn't have access to your own device, as a lot of young people don't, then things became really quite difficult during that time. The STEM Ambassador programme carried on in a way. Has to be said that the amount of activity went down by about 70%. It was took a real hit last year. But we still had some activity, and that's because we pivoted to virtual delivery. And whilst it wasn't wildly popular, it did fill a gap in some situations. So there's the opportunity to interact with classrooms, during the school day. And then STEM clubs, which is what would happen outside of school time, after school, and possibly at lunchtime. So those are the sorts of times of day that STEM ambassadors tend to volunteer. And then the sorts of things, there's a lot of focus on careers activities. So things like giving a talk about your own career or about careers in a particular area, getting involved in things like speed networking, hosting visits even, can be done virtually. Have seen some really great ones done virtually, but just seeing the inside of an office is something that not a lot of young people have actually done. And then various other online activities like mentoring, going along to things like science fair. I don't know if anyone's ever been to something like Cheltenham Science Festival or so on, those sorts of activities, and then working in settings which are nothing to do with schools and very little to do with education, and they are extremely stimulating as well. So I'm hoping I've given you, in that sort of 25 minutes or so, a bit of a background on volunteering, what STEM Ambassador Programme is all about, where it's come from. And I just wanted to open the floor out a little bit. And think about if you were to get involved in something like being a STEM ambassador and volunteering your time, why would you do that? What actually is in it for you as an individual? And people do volunteer, some of them hundreds of hours a year, some of them maybe 10 hours a year. But why do they do this? What is it in it for them? And take it personally. If you've got some personal motivations for volunteering, it might be nice to share some of those as well. So Dave has put in that you can use the chat window. I might suggest, I'm just having a look to see if you can. I don't know if people can put their hand up, but if people are sort of wanting to contribute by taking their mic off, then we can do that, I think, through the participant link.
If anyone wants to chime in here, please do either put something in the chat or put your hand up. I'm not sure. I think the hand thing works, and I can let people talk. I can certainly let people talk one at a time.
But it'd be nice to hear some people's sort of personal, if anyone's got any experience of having done this kind of volunteering before, it would be quite nice. Oh, Matthew Holbrook has raised his hand.
Oh, can you see hand raised? I can't see that. Weird.
I don't know. I am I feel privileged to have this information, but I think
it's because he's moved to the top. There we are.
There we go.
Matthew, please do.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Great. Okay. My motivation, I think, comes from feeling I've had almost a glittering IT career. It's felt a really good IT career in different ways, in different fields. And when I think back to my time at school, I think how I could have benefited so much from meeting someone like me in that role. And back in the early 80s, there was no IT at my school. And I had to go out and buy my first computer and teach it myself. And that's what gave me the IT career, both in the day job and a couple of decades of magazine writing as well. So that all came from my own sort of work. So I keep visualizing myself going back to my old school and making their eyes pop out of their head, you know, from the environment I come from, where we've got 200,000 users, a building of 2,500 people, right on the front line of IT. It would just blow their minds, I'm sure.
I think it's really nice to think of that as well. Thanks for sharing that, Matthew. I think it's really nice to think about, you know, talking to your teenage self, as it were. That's quite a common trope, isn't it, as well? But what would I say to myself at 16 and those sorts of things, and thinking about those decisions you made that you might make differently now if you had the wisdom that you have now. And I think, you know, that's you know, that knowledge, that understanding and realization that that young people aren't thick. They just don't know what you know, right? They just don't know this. They haven't heard it, and quite often they'll not hear it unless you tell them. They're not going to go and seek it out. They will just make the same mistakes that you made. and so yes, I think that's a nice insight there. Thanks, Matthew. I'm just going to go, as someone's called Josh Peck said something quite similar in the chat, saying, for ages I avoided following the path I'm in now, and so I want to let others know that they can pursue those options. So there's this idea of you know, sharing one's mistakes, and that's quite a nice thing to think about when it comes to things like mentoring, for example, which is a STEM ambassador activity, and not telling people you should do it this way. That's not what mentoring is at all. It's you know, providing space for the conversation to take place, where you can provide nudges and signposting and guidance and thought-provoking questions for a young person to help them find their way through. So, like, you know, for Josh, you know, it would be having that sort of constructive conversation with someone, rather than you know, just simply telling them something, because I'm sure if someone came and told me this is what I was going to do when I was 16, I'd have told them, no, I'm not. I don't know what I wanted, but I don't think I wanted this, but I'm quite happy now. So it is an interesting conversation to have. And then Alex has said, to improve society and open eyes to different opportunities. It really is quite an altruistic thing. Quite an altruistic thing. It is something where you go, this is, I can't think of it from my point of view. I can only think of it how good it's going to be for everybody else. And that's great. And then there's this raise awareness of contemporary issues for young people to look out for. And it's interesting thinking about digital industries. Something that actually isn't very present in the school computing curriculum, which I'll come on to in a minute, is cybersecurity. So they do a lot about sort of internet safety from quite a young age, but actually in terms of contemporary issues and things to look out for, there is a little bit of guidance, special guidance needed, I think, for young people when it comes to talking about computing and talking about the next industrial revolution and so on, in that they can get lost in this very, very easily, and perhaps take pathways that will not be particularly fruitful for them. And so I think there is a sort of a corporate social responsibility in a way on some people who work in some aspects of IT industry to be able to provide that kind of insight and guidance and heads up essentially, to help the young people, but also the people who are working with the young people, the teachers and the youth workers, to pick really good, useful and less risky perhaps pathways than some might do otherwise. I'm just going to read quickly your message, Adam. Yes. Okay, well, that actually, what you've just said there, Adam, about the lack of value placed on IT and computing, it was very low status, I think, for an awfully long time. there was a report out, and I think it was 2012 from the Royal Society, which basically said we're at risk of losing any kind of position that we have as a country if we don't sort out our computer science education and stop it from being this low status, you know, oh well, if you must kind of subject that we sort of half taught in schools. And I have to admit that I was part of that as a science teacher. They went, oh, you can use Microsoft Excel, off you go, and while you're at it, can you learn how to make a website in Front Page Express, and then tell the kids how to do that. And so that was their experience of being taught computing was me, and my lack of skills having to do that. And that was back in the sort of early 2000s. That is different now. That has changed, or it's in process of changing, I should say. Yes, and that idea about building things digitally that you've mentioned there, Adam, that actually this digital world is really creative. It's about problem solving. It's about identifying a need. It's about building things that meet that need and working in particular ways that enable that. And so that kind of understanding comes from people like yourselves, that kind of passion that this is not, you know, I was going to say robots, but you know, this is not blind following of rules and procedures. It is a creative, engaging, customer-focused kind of business, kind of world, and the more they hear about it from people like you, the better. So thank you very much for that, for joining in there. And I'm just sorry
to interrupt. There's one
right.
further question that you might be about to cover, but have you reached out and run any events in or for prisons?
I'm going to answer that quickly actually now, because it doesn't come up. Prisons is not somewhere where we've done a lot of work. Now, I think something, David, you mentioned talking about that adding value in other settings, and I feel like this might come up for you in those sorts of conversations, but because we focus on schools, there is an opportunity if someone from, say, a secure unit wanted to work with STEM ambassadors, we could facilitate that, we could help that happen, but it's not part of the general activities that we do. But David, I don't know if that's something that you think might come up in the later chat.
I mean, it might do. I mean, certainly I'd be very, very keen on exploring how we might do that in the future. I know that the STEM learning focus is on young people.
Yeah.
So that overlap is probably going to be quite small.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, so Alex, that was from Alex. You'll find me anywhere. You'll find me on the BCS website. So do get in touch after. I'll be very keen on exploring that at some later points.
Thanks for that. And also it's probably worth pointing out, you know, we do quite a lot of work, certainly in this part of the country, with people like the National Cybersecurity Centre, and they have very strong links into the police. And so we do try and perhaps catch a few before they end up in prison, because that is obviously somewhere that you know, that I mentioned before, that young people can be pulled into activity that is really not very healthy at all. And so there is some overlap with the law, if you like, in that sense, but not really with prisons. But that does take me nicely, I think, if I can segue from that into just going back over one of the things that I mentioned previously, which was the impact that COVID had on and is having on education. And I'm going to use this as a way to start talking a little bit, give you a little bit of insight into the education landscape, because I think it can be difficult to know where you can have an impact if you don't know the landscape that we're talking about. So it does tie in really nicely with the question, actually. So prior to COVID, we were focusing on this thing called science capital quite a lot, and it's a bit of a sociological construct, this idea of capital, like social capital and financial capital and so on and so forth. And someone had come up with this idea of science capital, which I described earlier, that kids who have a lot of science capital, so they have the parents and the family and the activities and lots of knowledge and sort of cultural aspects that are linked into science or STEM are more likely to be the ones who pursue a career in it. What happened with COVID, I'm sure most of you are very aware, is that with the switch almost literally overnight, it was a terrifyingly quick transfer to online schooling, online learning, completely unprepared. What was very quickly discovered was that a large number of young people do not have anything like what we imagine the level of access to digital tools that they needed to be able to access the schooling effectively. They were lacking the hardware, they were lacking the connectivity to the internet, they were lacking space at home to be able to do this. They lacked a lot. And quite a few people, and possibly quite a few people on this call, jumped in at that point to try and help fill some of those gaps in a really practical sense. There was some amazing work that went on. Just trying to get laptops into the hands of, you know, a kid just about to go into year 10 or something like that, just about to do their exams without that equipment during the middle of a pandemic. What a nightmare. And so that involved some STEM ambassadors, but it involved the sort of wider community as well. And but this kind of went on for quite a long time. So back at the beginning of this year, if you remember, we were back into a situation where schools were closed for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they did lose out. You know, the young people, even the ones who were reasonably well resourced, did lose out, and they lost out massively on that connection with people. And that is the thing, you know, for all the practical support that we try to put in place with laptops and 4G dongles and all that sort of thing, that is the thing that the STEM Ambassador Programme and this sort of volunteering really offers, is that interpersonal connection. And all the things that you said were your motivations, they all suffered when it came to volunteering during the COVID-19 pandemic. We tried to fill some of the gap with some virtual offerings, people making videos, people doing online mentoring, that sort of thing. But frankly, people were getting sick of it by, you know, let's say February this year. I'd had it up to here. And, you know, young people don't have a lot of patience for that. Once they're sick of it, they're sick of it. And certainly the older kids, a lot of them became very difficult to reach during this time. And so what there is a real passion for, whilst appreciating it's difficult, is to get back to that in-person volunteering, because that's where the real value comes from. And we want to give young people the chance to connect with people like yourself who have the knowledge, the skills, the expertise, the passions in technology that will help them see a future for themselves. And that's what this idea is of Building Back Better is for us. It is those connections coming back again. Who you know matters. And when it comes to STEM ambassadors, we can offer children repeated interactions with adults who talk about STEM and who engage in STEM activities with them. We increase the amount of that science and STEM capital that they have, and increase the chance that they'll perhaps see themselves as scientists, technologists of the future. I noticed a couple of, oh, thanks, Dave's put a couple of bits in about digital poverty, which is really gives you a bit of an idea. So there is, there are a need to sort of go back to this in-person volunteering. And it kind of links into this thing about safeguarding as well. Now, if you are a STEM ambassador or you are thinking of becoming a STEM ambassador, safeguarding is something that you have to deal with. So as adults working with vulnerable young people, or just young people who are, you know, by definition vulnerable, we talk about safeguarding. And in that, all of us as adults have a role to play in taking action, doing something to make sure children are protected from harm, their development is not impaired, they receive effective care. All of this stuff suffered during COVID and during the lockdown. And so not just, you know, thinking about safeguarding as, oh, it's something we've got to do, oh, I have to get a DBS check, all those sorts of things. But actually, it's fundamental to what we're trying to do as volunteers. It's actually, we're trying to improve the lot of this group of young people who aren't just, you know, vulnerable because of their age, but they're also doubly vulnerable now because of the situation that they found themselves in that was utterly not of their making. And so, yeah, safeguarding is something that actually is very close to my heart, because I think people see it as a series of hoops to jump through, but actually it's the core of what we do when we work with kids. And it's something that we can have a real impact on, making sure that they get the opportunities they deserve. Essentially, they get the opportunities that perhaps we didn't have, and they get the opportunities to find out about stuff that they could really improve their lives. So yeah, thinking about the system that we work in, this is it, complicated, sorry, but it's worth considering just briefly. This is the English education system, and plus some volunteering type activities that go alongside it, from youngest left on the left to oldest on the right. The ages, some of the language that we use, and the sort of institutions where young people are. Now, if you're a parent, you're probably quite familiar with some of this. You get more familiar as they get older. If you're not a parent, it's all like another country. And particularly if you weren't educated in the UK or weren't educated in England even, this can all be a little bit of a lot of jargon and nonsense to you. But essentially, the bit on the left-hand side is primary school. And for STEM ambassadors, that tends to be a focus on excitement, enthusiasm, inspiring engagement, and most importantly, breaking down stereotypes. So terrifyingly, where it says Key Stage 1 there, that's the youngest years in school. By the end of Key Stage 1, they already have stereotypes about young people. They already have stereotypes about who can and does do STEM. Starts terrifyingly young, much younger than we thought it would do. When they did the research, and they found, yeah, by the age of sort of 6 or 7, they've got these ideas of who does science and who doesn't do science, who does technology, who doesn't. And so we at primary school, it's about putting faces in front of them as diverse and as, you know, wide reaching as we possibly can, and talking about the kind of jobs that people do, and giving them the opportunity to develop all these lovely like teamworking skills and leadership skills and all of that. Bearing in mind also, from perspective of the computing curriculum, that also starts at Key Stage 1 now. So at Key Stage 1, there is proper input in terms of computing from that stage, and that goes all the way through to end of Key Stage 4, which is the GCSE year. So that's sort of 2/3 of the way through the green bit is where they have that assessment. Obviously, for the past couple of years, they've not had exams, but they would normally have exams at the end of Key Stage 4. In the green section, that's a lot of careers stuff, tends to be. Okay, early on, a bit more of that inspiration, engaging, enthusing kind of stuff. And then as they get older, it's more information driven. So it's more, okay, you want to do this, so let's figure out how you're going to get there. Oh, had you thought about X, Y, Z, A, B, C, you know, all of those things. That kind of more careers focused stuff tends to happen at that end. So hopefully you can see a little bit about how the role of a STEM ambassador might change over that time. And what we ask from STEM ambassadors is that they in fact, we make it harder for you. We ask for 2 things a year for 2 years, because that kind of long-term engagement is much more impactful for the young people. We want to sort of get them like more often. we want them to see more people more often. So having your commitment for a number of years is really useful. But it's also better for you as an individual. If you can commit for that sort of length of time, you get more out of it as well. Your professional development, your communication skills, your logistics, your understanding of what is useful, what is engaging, what works is better if you do it more often. And you become more confident as a volunteer if you volunteer more often. So we do try and ask you to commit as much as possible, but we appreciate, and certainly in the last year that has been blindingly clear, that it is very difficult sometimes, and so we're quite patient, really. We ask people to communicate with us, otherwise these activities don't happen, not just with us but with the people who organise the activities, and we ask people to give feedback and to comment and to do that sort of contribution thing through attending trainings and so on. So that's what we expect. I just want to go back, if I can, to this, and I'm going to ask for some actually I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is I'm going to go on and talk a little bit more about the computing stuff, and then we'll come back to doing some questions in a bit. I've just taken a look at the time. I don't want to run over. So just, that wasn't meant to happen. Thank you. Just to give a bit of context in terms of the computing side of things. So the national curriculum subject is now called computing. It's not called ICT. And there may well be a range of qualifications that schools and colleges are encouraging their students to take, but the national curriculum subject is called computing, and this change happened sort of 2015-ish, that kind of time. And then in 2018, the National Centre for Computing Education was set up, because obviously there's a bit of a gap between saying we want all kids to have a world-leading computing education and actually delivering that computing education. So the NCCE was set up to and funded by the Department of Education in collaboration between STEM Learning, who are actually their primary activity, their main activity is delivering teacher training and CPD. The Raspberry Pi Foundation, who you will know, and yourself, BCS. So that consortium basically put together this package of support to try and get more teachers teaching computing. And obviously there's a limited supply, right? Like if everyone who did computing, say at university, then went and became a computing teacher, we wouldn't have anyone doing the computing. So there had to be a sort of a bit of a conversion and a retraining of a number of teachers, and that the goal was pretty steep, to train 8,000 teachers in the first few years. We're not there yet, but the programs involved, Teach Computing is the main teacher CPD and resource side of things. And then there's Isaac Computer Science, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is a set of resources developed by the University of Cambridge. And then there's a sort of research project looking at approaches to teaching computing in a way that encourages gender balance. So there's a huge imbalance in computing education. There's far more boys involved than there are girls. And so they're looking at ways of addressing that. Teach Computing is the thing that is the main driver of all of this at the moment. And so there's CPD courses and certification. And the reason I mention this is because STEM ambassadors get involved in that. So we have currently got a cohort of maybe 15 or 20 ambassadors who come along to our computing themed courses that we run for teachers, and contribute something about their career, talking about what it's like in industry, offering up suggestions for projects, offering even work experience sometimes, those sorts of things. STEM ambassadors getting involved in teacher training, because that is where the need is, massively at the moment. And I'm coming on to Isaac Computer Science, which is something I only found out about recently. But there's a huge bank of resources that will tell you literally everything that needs to be taught at GCSE but at A level mostly, and they've just introduced the GCSE side of things. So if you want to know what is being taught and how it's being taught in terms of computing at GCSE and A level, Isaac Computer Science, which is part of the National Centre, is the place to go and look. It will tell you everything you need to know. And if you're interested in the gender balance work, it's a much smaller project. You can go online and have a look and see what they're doing to address the imbalance. And it's quite interesting, a very creative approach they're taking to the pedagogy, essentially how they teach computing to address the gender imbalance in there at the moment. So that's where sort of BCS has been working for the past number of years, as well as there are many other sort of computing education hubs and networks that have existed and still exist over the years as well. But those are the ones from the STEM learning perspective and the collaboration with BCS and Raspberry Pi that have had the biggest effect. And we have computing hubs based across the region who are the ones leading on this school-based support, and who are the ones requesting support from people like yourself to come in and talk to teachers about what computing is like, what IT is, if you like, in the real world, and to offer those sorts of insights and opportunities that they can then pass on to their students. And just the last sort of call to action, I suppose. It's nice. If you're not already a STEM ambassador, I'm hoping I might have convinced you, because even before we start thinking about what it is we're going to do, I think becoming a STEM ambassador is a really good place to start, because it gives you the confidence that you can enact the things that you want to take forward. There's loads of free training, there's loads of free online training available, and there's more being developed all the time. And we also, as a hub, deliver free training, and it's been all online for the past couple of years, but we have done some face-to-face training as well. So there's loads of support available to be a better ambassador. And when it comes to activities, there is already a lot out there that's going on. I could have spent the same amount of time just talking about all the activities. If you, a link there, the Padlet, I don't know if you come across Padlet, it's a great little tool, very easy to use, lots of schools use it. There's a whole pile of different activities. Mostly we put that list together for a cyber training that we're doing, so they have got a tech bent. And then taking part in hub-based training, networking, all those sorts of things. So I think, Dave, if you put those links in the chat, some of them. Oh yeah, I should put the Isaac stuff in. But yes, we'll be sharing the slides, so you will get the links. And that's it. That's it from me. I've stopped talking now. And we can have some people asking questions. That would be a really good, good place to do it.
That's been great. Thanks very much. I think there is a chance, although a small one, there's a chance that we'll get dropped at 1:30. So just in case.
Oh no.
I hope not, but just in case, I'll do thanks first. That was absolutely great. I love that. Thanks very much for coming along, Liz.
All right.
I really enjoy that. So I've worked as STEM ambassador, but even having done a bit of stuff, this was great for me. So I very much hope it was great for the beginners and the potentials as well. And I do love a call to action at the end. Great way to finish off. Absolutely love it.
There you go. I'll go put that back.
No, it's great. So in the hope that we don't get dropped automatically at 7:30, if anyone's got any questions, please do stick your hand up initially, and then I'll invite you into. So we've got a question there. So, Scout leader, how can I arrange a visit from a STEM ambassador? Okay,
very easily. If you go to stem.org.uk, there is a way to request a STEM ambassador. So you may need to register, and you can register as a youth leader, I think it's called. And you go in and you basically put your request in. You put things in like the date that you want, or a suggested date. It's obviously a bit of a negotiation sometimes. You write a description of what you want the STEM ambassador to do. So if you're doing a badge, for example, you might write the outline of the badge and the sorts of things you might want someone to come in and contribute. And you make your request live, and then STEM ambassadors get notified that there is a request in their area. So you put in a sort of geographical location, or you make it online, whatever, and they get in touch. So the more interesting, exciting you make your requests, the more likely you are to get STEM ambassador coming in and offering it. So it is a little bit of an advert really that you're putting on, but it's free to do. It's all entirely free as a program to access. So it's free for you as a Scout leader to go on, sign up, and then add an activity, and you can use the messaging system on the site to negotiate the details with your STEM ambassador.
Thanks. In fact, I was having a chat the other day. I met a random stranger when I was on a bike ride last weekend who worked in a school, and we started chatting about some stuff in this area. And I said, well, I do this 8-week thing with Python programming at Key Stage 5. And she said, oh, that sounds interesting. How much does that cost? And I said, what do you mean? How much does that cost? And she said, well, what's the school? I said, well, nothing. And I still wonder now if BCS events and STEM learning events, we don't make enough of the fact that this is free. We're not charging.
Sometimes that can be, it's a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes, because people see free and they think cheap.
No value.
Okay. And so that is a little bit of it's certainly not a huge barrier, but it can be a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
And schools do have budgets for this sort of thing. They do have to budget for CPD, for example, and so on.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's no money out there, but the fact that it is free of charge does make it accessible to certainly to people like Scouts who are sort of running on pennies. So
so you talked about an advertising stuff, and I'm going to jump in with another advert. So what we're doing here is just one way in which BCS members can engage with other things that aren't just your day job. And for me, certainly over the past 5 years, so I did an event yesterday where I was talking about just this, about my journey through BCS. And those early years didn't do nearly enough. Really, really wish that I had. And it's not entirely selfish doing this kind of thing, of course, but it's not entirely altruistic either. I've learned a lot from doing STEM ambassador work, and I've really enjoyed it. And there's other ways in which you can engage with BCS and with your professional bodies generally. And they're all really valuable. You get to be a much more rounded person doing this stuff. So even if you only want to consider this as a purely selfish act, it works as a purely selfish act.
I mean, if you want to sort of be even more sort of, I don't know, commercially minded about it, I suppose, there is elements in sort of public procurement and so on, which does refer to activities like this as having social value. And so, if you're working in the public sector, this is quite well regarded as a route to sort of adding social value. Those sorts of community facing activities are part of the process now. So, yeah, it's definitely not a bad thing.
Yeah, and not just in the public sector. So I work in the private sector, and CSR, corporate social responsibility, is a thing that people consider. You know, our image gets better if we do stuff like this. And additionally, there's anyone who's 50-ish and is in a senior position in an organisation will be thinking things like, well, I want to give back now. So some of it is altruistic. So some people in positions who are perhaps above, in a kind of management chain above where our audience is today, we'll be quite happy to say, well, we'll support this because it's good. We're just going to support it because it's good. There's no other reason than that. That's why we support it, because we think it's good.
And if you don't ask, you don't get often with these things. And if you're worried that, you know, your time is minuted, as it were, then often there are cost codes and whatever else available for you to be able to charge your time against volunteering, that sort of thing, because it is actually valued by the company. They just don't maybe shout about it.
I know that. So there's I think 2 people here that work in the same business as I do. So thanks for coming. But we do that. I think our numbers are roughly speaking half a day a month for this kind of voluntary activity, and that's great for doing STEM work, certainly.
Yeah,
that timing works. So I'm going to throw in a question that I know the answer to, but imagine that I want to get in and do some stuff in some kind of digital STEM learning space, but I don't know what to do. I haven't prepared any resources. I haven't got a thing that I want to deliver, but I want to get in and do some stuff. So what do I do?
Okay, I would start off probably a very similar place that most STEM ambassadors would start, which is thinking about your own career, thinking about how you got to where you are at the moment, and just putting together a couple of slides that describe you, and that kind of input could go in, you know, with a virtual activity, you know, virtual careers activity, just talking about myself, you know, those sorts of things, where actually your personal story is as impactful as anything else you could perhaps contribute in terms of curriculum additions or anything like that. So think really carefully about your own journey to where you are now, and put together you know, a slide or two, not too much text, that that describes that journey and describes you and what you do now. And I would always start from that point of view. And I think if you wanted to make it more sort of tailored and specific to digital and to that sort of thing, the drive at the moment really is on this teacher training thing. And so that kind of, this is me and this is what I do and this is where I come from, but delivered to teachers through a CPD session that you get involved in, is really going to have an impact, because teachers don't have that experience of working in industry on the whole. On the whole, they don't. And so your input from that point of view helps build that rapport with a teacher, who can then start asking more detailed questions and perhaps start trusting you as someone they can come to and ask technical questions of. So it is a relationship business that we're in. So they have to trust you. They have to be able to rely on that sort of content that you might offer them, before they'll take it on themselves and before they'll put you in front of their kids, and so their students. And so that building rapport is really, really important. So have your spiel, know what your story is, go to networking or go to a CPD event and talk to some teachers. Have a look at that Isaac stuff so that you've got a sense of the sorts of topics they have. And you'll be surprised, you know, algorithmic thinking and that sort of thing starts at Key Stage 1. And so, you know, there is a lot of content there and a lot of stuff that you will not remember from your school days potentially, that they now get taught at GCSE and A level. And so I would do that first, because then that relationship is going to be what's going to get you in front of a student somewhere and really doing that sort of like key engagement stuff, I think.
That's great, thanks. And again, that fits in with, well, I'm going to do one more question from Adam in a moment, but that fits in with what I'm trying to push here at BCS Bristol and Bath, is that engaging with others. So you've just expressed very succinctly some expertise that I didn't have. So this engagement with others is something that perhaps we don't do enough of in our industry in general. Certainly in my early career, I didn't do any of that, and I really, really wish I had, as I said earlier. But that engaging with people like you who know this area is the way to do this. Absolutely. So for everyone else who's still here, do just get engaged. We've got one more question, I think. Adam, so being new to this, I'm very used to providing very highly technical information to people who are experts. So creating something aimed towards teachers and children is something I'm not used to at all. Where can I find resources to help me create content tailored to teachers, young people? Well, I think the obvious answer for me, and I'm going to let you do the obvious answer, the actual answer, Liz, from STEM learning. That's where you get this stuff. Liz,
yeah, that's it. I mean, I think, this is something that working in STEM is particularly the case. So you're not alone, Adam, at all, because so many people all across the spectrum say, what I do is really hard, no one else understands it. And that's true of so many people who work in STEM. And so what I would do is take a step back from the idea, when you sort of teach as a professional, when you're sort of transferring knowledge, as it were, as a professional, you're used to kind of creating your own resources and you know, create your own presentation, for example, and that sort of thing. I would take a step back from that. There are resources available. So I've mentioned the Isaac resource, which does give you sort of an idea of how a teacher might approach it. And STEM learning has a huge bank of resources. Teach Computing has a huge bank of resources that you might be able to access as well. But there are people who've already done this work, essentially is what I'm saying. So find what they have done and also focus more on yourself as an individual, as opposed to yourself as your professional title, whatever that is. And so if you start from that position of talking about yourself rather than your work, and then be guided what other people have already done. And if it sounds like cheating, it is, and teachers do it all the time. So it's completely okay to use somebody else's resources and not necessarily pass them off as your own, but adapt them to your own use. You don't have to start from scratch. And I think that's my answer there. Does that sound good?
It sounds good to me. I'll see if I can. Can I, Adam? You should be able. I've done it wrong. No,
I can see his name.
I've clicked more things. I've clicked more things than I meant to. Adam, I think you can talk if you want. You don't have to, because I've clicked the button too many times to know whether you can actually talk. That works for me. And I think again, this comes back to, for me, this comes back to collaboration. This collaboration isn't just about doing a collaboration, it's about taking advantage of other people's expertise, whether they're those that have gone before and done it already and doing stuff that you want to do, or working with others with generally different expertise. I mean, having worked fairly closely with teachers during my stuff, I think, wow, teaching's hard. Teachers know a lot of stuff. It's stuff that I don't know. It's stuff that I realistically am never going to learn, because I haven't got time now in the next 30 years to retrain as a teacher. So I just have to take advantage of their expertise. And it's that collaboration. I think it's, as Bertrand Russell once said, it's cooperation that will redeem mankind.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is a communication game. We're in the business of communication. It's the C in ICT, in fact. But that
oh yeah, it is.
Information communication.
Yeah, no, it absolutely
it is.
It really is,
isn't it? It's the C in ICT. But yeah, it is about communication. It is about going in as a partner, with this. With the teacher or with the youth leader, whoever it is, they know their kids, they know their stuff, you know your stuff, and somewhere in the middle, that's the magic.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think that's a great note to finish on. Sorry, I fluffed it then. A great note to finish on. So thanks very much for that, Liz. That was absolutely amazing. That's been great.
Thank you.
We'll see the slides and the talk go out as a recording as soon as BCS processes that. We can do the slides earlier. So if anyone else wants to get in touch with me, so you'll find Dave's on here on Twitter, on BCS or somewhere. If you want to get the slides themselves earlier than BCS will publish them, that shouldn't be an issue, I don't think. Liz, if you can send those to me, then I will send them. Yeah. Thank you very much. I figured that would go without saying. But yeah, so for BCS, for the attendees, same time next month, we are hoping, we haven't sort of the details yet, we are hoping to have something similar where we're going to talk about how BCS Bristol and Bath can engage in the charity sector. So we've talked today about how you can provide value to schools. We're going to talk next month about how you can provide value to charities in the digital space. So you'll see some notes on that in the next couple of days, hopefully. But again, Liz, thanks very much for that. That's been great.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone else for coming. So I'm going to end this now, and you should all see it all vanish. Have a good evening all, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Good night.
Thanks.